Welcome to the Generous Business Owner Podcast, where business owners gain inspiration and encouragement to live a legacy, not just leave one. And now your hosts, Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. My name's Jeff Thomas, and we've got our co-host, Jeff Rutt, with us today. Say hello to the people, Jeff.
Hello to the people.
And we have a very special guest with us today, Mickey Peters. Mickey has a very diverse background as a CEO for over 15 years of all kinds of enterprises, largely, water and energy related in Latin America. Fascinating stories. He speaks Spanish, but since I don't know about you, Jeff, but my Spanish is terrible. So we'll keep it in English today. But he also is a business owner and has been a consultant in a wide-ranging business career, but also a very important ministry that he and his wife are involved in. And we want to hear all about both of those things, the business piece and the ministry piece. But as we always get started, we like to hear about growing up. So, Jeff, take it away.
Yes.
And Mickey, welcome to the program. I should say that. Let you have a moment to say hello to the people.
Hello to the people. Glad to be here.
All right.
Can't wait to chat with you guys.
Mickey, thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. Looking forward to hearing your story. Let's start off with just giving our listeners, what was it like growing up in the Mickey's childhood, the Mickey household, faith formation, values formation, work ethic, generosity, all the domains.
Yeah. So thanks. Growing up in Mickey's, little Mickey, right? There probably a couple of themes, right? One, my dad was a manager of textile plants, and he worked for a company that had a lot of them spread out across the U.S. So my first 6 years of school, every year I was the new kid in school. We moved every single year.
Wow.
And so, my parents, I've always say they did the very best they could, but they're both, to this day, they're still alive, they're still together, but they're both emotionally very shut down. So every year it was like, go ahead, son, you'll be fine. Get out there, meet some people. And so the result of that is I became an extreme people pleaser, and being a part of a group was not just, a passing fancy. It was life or death, right? I didn't want to be the lone kid on the playground. I didn't have anybody to hang out with, or didn't get picked for the team, or sit alone in the cafeteria. And it happened to me every single year in elementary school, and that developed that insatiable desire to be liked and to be a part of a group and not be excluded.
Wow.
And we were a Catholic. I was born and baptized in the Catholic Church, and we did all the sacraments. But it was really, for me, more of a check the box thing, right? I went, my mom and dad went, we do this, okay, what's next? What's the next thing? And so religion, I learned the basics. I knew about, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, and which again served me well later in life. I knew that growing up, but it wasn't something that I owned for myself. And the other thing that was really influential throughout my life was my dad had a big porn stash when I was growing up. And so with that emotionally shut down, what do I do with all of these negative emotions and feelings of fear, anxiety, overwhelm, whatever it might be, was numbing out with when I was looking at Dad's porn stash and masturbation, right? And so that's where I kind of grooved. I'm a recovering sex addict, but that's where I grooved that way of coping, and I call it an unhealthy coping mechanism. And the other thing that actually probably made a bigger influence was he taught me how to keep it a secret, right? He said, Mickey, just don't get caught. If you're going to do it, lock the door. The key is don't get busted. As long as you can do that, it's okay. He didn't say those words, but I grew up in the late 70s, early 80s. Most of my friends' dads had porn stashes, and it wasn't uncommon. But that secrecy, having a double life, became as we get into later in the podcast, was a big theme for me. Keep it a secret. Have your secret life secret. But overall, it was a good family. My parents were, I took a lot of things that my dad taught me: work ethic. He taught me discipline. he never let me quit a job. He always made me, stick with it. And so really grateful, and we had my house was the house everybody congregated at after school. My mom always had cookies and she let me listen to rock music with my friends. And so, we had a good house. It was just, as always, some imperfections there that had an impact as well.
Youth group, kids. So the kids came to your house. What was that like, as far as your parents influencing your friends' kids, and how did that impact your choice of friends and, kind of that?
Yeah, most of my friends had, I've already told you a little bit of my dysfunction in my family. They had worse dysfunction. They had, abuse, neglect, violence. And so my parents were very, still to this day, I have probably 3 or 4 friends of mine that I grew up with that are still close with my parents because they were safe. They were good. We would go hang out, and my dad used to take us to sporting events. And I grew up in Eagle Pass, which is on the border. My dad was in Maquiladora. He managed a plant in Mexico, textile plant. And so San Antonio, we would go to Spurs, and we also went to rock concerts. My dad took me to some Ozzy Osbourne, Aerosmith, and he would take me and my friends and wait for us. And after the concert, he'd take us home. And a couple times he went, and so he was kind of a cool dad in that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So high school, what were the post high school education years like?
So I'm an Aggie, went to Texas A&M, was in the
Okay.
Corps of Cadets. So really, pretty, I had to go to school, had to go to class, basically had to go to class, and had, that discipline was really a good thing for me. And so big Aggie, and really developed some good friendships there. And really, that's where my faith story really began when I was. So the way I tell it, I became a senior. I was a senior in the Corps, had the boots, all that stuff, right? The senior in the Corps wears, and I was engaged to be married. I had a job at Ernst & Young. I had arrived, right? I had arrived. I had checked all the boxes, but I didn't feel anything that I thought I was supposed to feel. There was no, it's like empty. And there was this guy that used to preach the gospel out on the campus at that time, and he would start with the current event and kind of bring in large groups of people, but he'd always end his time with a presentation of the gospel. And one time when I was in this moment of, man, I should feel great. I've arrived. I've done all the, checked all the boxes. He did that. And I'd never really heard the way he presented it was very effective in the sense of it's a relationship. I thought of it as just, it's something you did every Sunday. I never heard it presented like that. So I closed my eyes and prayed the prayer with him at the end, and definitely felt, wow, something happened there. But I was in my senior outfit. I didn't want to go up and make a scene. So I went back to my dorm room, pulled out my fake leather zipper Bible, and started reading the Gospel of John. And that's really where I say my faith journey began, was at that moment when I prayed with that prayer with, his name was Ron Tucson. I remember the guy's name. Ron Tucson was preaching the gospel out there in A&M.
Wow. That's powerful.
Was that a campus event or was that at a church?
No, it was just, he would go out and open air preach.
Open air.
Because he was such an effective speaker. I learned later he was a former actor, so he was not at all hellfire and brimstone, but he would talk about current events and people would come up and engage with him. And he was very gifted at just, not really arguing with them, but just back and forth. And,
yeah, wow.
And he would attract hundreds and sometimes, big crowds right on the other side of the academic building, the back side of the academic building. That's where I accepted Christ. And then I got baptized in the chemistry fountain at second at A&M.
Was there, and the chemistry fountain, so the water was okay though? They tested the
pH. How was the pH?
Well, I should say it was the fountain in front of the chemistry building.
Yeah. No,
should be fine then. Should be fine.
Yeah. It was fine.
Yeah. So when did you meet Mrs. Peters?
Well, so current Mrs. Peters is my second wife. I met my first wife at school, and that was, I was really, we were dating when I became a Christian, and so it was this really kind of awkward She didn't really know what to do with me at that point, and I was, it was a very awkward time, and so it was probably should have been a red flag, but it was, we were headed down the path. We're going to get married.
You
She
didn't know
gave me,
enough to make it a red flag.
yeah, I was like, all right, let's get married.
Yeah,
And
right.
it was the wrong thing to do. And the marriage lasted 10 years, but that led me to my third baptism when I joined Talwood Baptist Church here in Houston, and I got dunked in the pool up there on the altar, and so I've been baptized 3 times.
Wow.
Awesome. So I'm gonna let the other Jeff take over.
Okay,
but
so
how do you dive into your first career?
yeah,
Where'd you start?
were you on the accounting or the consulting side of E&Y?
I was an auditor.
Yeah.
So it was 100 hours a week.
Yep.
Forget what month it is. You
Yep.
forget your name. You don't even know the president's name. You're just cranking out work papers.
I was down the street at Anderson doing the same thing. So we never bumped into each other because all we saw were our coworkers doing that.
Yeah.
So
I did that for 4 years and just couldn't, I was realized this is not most of the partners are divorced, and it was just like, not where I want to go.
grinder.
So I left and went into industry as an accountant, as a forecaster for, at the time it was Panhandle Eastern Corporation.
Oh yeah.
It merged with Texas Eastern and all of that, and eventually became Duke Energy, Penn Energy, Duke Energy. Now it's part of can't think of the pipeline company name. But anyway, so yeah, I started the career there. I got an MBA at U of H in the late 90s. A boss of mine kind of mentored me, great guy. John Sickman was his name. He's passed since then, but he was a rough and tumble kind of, he'd spent years working for an E&P company in the North Sea and loved that environment. So he smoked like a chimney, and I learned all the smoking areas in every airport and every building in South America. And but he was a great mentor. He's
They're
really
probably
good.
still going. They're probably still smoking down there. I don't know. Are they?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, that was back when they would have a smoking section in the
Oh
airplanes.
yeah.
The last row of the
Yeah.
business
Right
section.
in the airline. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. On the plane in the little tube. Yeah. Terrible.
Yeah, it was brutal. But anyway, so it's baptism of fire. We were trying to buy business, follow Enron. Enron was the leader, right? Everybody was trying to be like Enron. So we were buying businesses down there, and we ended up buying a business from another company, and part of that business was in Peru and Ecuador. So I just finished my MBA, spoke a little Spanglish, and so, Mickey, you're going to go run this operation. Okay, I had my young wife, and by this time I'm married to Stephanie, my current wife, and I had no idea what we were getting into. Lima, Peru is a rough expat assignment. And I was in over my head. Stephanie had just lost her father to cancer. So she was grieving him, and it was just, we were not at all ready for that experience. And so that's where the, acting out really ramped up, and I ended up having an affair with a woman and getting her pregnant. And so that was a setback.
How much? Wow. I know that was a life-altering time. How much time were you spending down there? Were you going? I mean, you know what I mean?
We were living down there. We were living in Lima,
both
Peru.
of you?
Yeah. So my daughter was born down there, and I was a big fish in a little pond. I was in way over my head, but I was the president of the American Chamber of Commerce. I welcomed George Bush down there when he came. So I was a little, arrogant and full of myself, but I was dying on the inside because I had no, Jeff, you're part of C12. I was like on my own. My boss at the time really didn't want to mess with it. I don't know anything about Peru. Good luck. Just make your numbers, right? And so it was incredibly stressful. And I spoke Spanish. I was taking lessons and whatnot, but I was just under incredible stress, but nowhere to go with it. No
outlet.
We're members of a church, but that's where that secret life I mentioned before, like, okay, I'm going to start doing these things, but keep it, secret, keep it hidden. And so I was able to do that because I wasn't just having an affair. I was having sex with prostitutes, and it really got out of control until I got my affair partner pregnant, and then I had to tell Stephanie, and that was the beginning of really. We came back to Houston. Our pastor Dave McKechnie over at Grace Presbyterian, he'd married us 5 years before. Said, "Well, Pastor McKechnie, let me give you an update on where things stand." And he said, so I told him what had happened, and he's a really good guy. He said, "Mickey, Stephanie, first of all, you're not the first couple that sat on those chairs and told me a story like this. So you're not alone. And the second thing he said was, it's not that this has happened to you, but it's what you do with it. And that will either make you better or bitter. And that is up to you." And so Steph and I kind of said, well, I think we should go for better, right? Let's let's not go for bitter. And Dave has been a big, still continues to be a great friend. And so anyway, that was the bottom, if you will. And I got into 12-step recovery and really started getting on a path of healing and recovery. We moved to Brazil. Same title, and the business was going great. All this chaos was happening in my personal life. The business went really well. I got promoted actually, and I was running the operation in Brazil, which was much larger. And there's when I got into a YPO at the time, Young Presidents Organization, small group. We started a home church with some other expat couples, and I started doing therapy as well and reading a lot. And it was just in Brazil, if you're not familiar with it, is an amazing, very spiritual country, and just was the perfect place for us to go and kind of work on ourselves away from families. Really was really important.
Do you remember what were some of the, besides the word, what else do you remember that was impactful that you were reading during that time?
So everything from Brennan Manning, Henry Nouwen, John Eldridge, Dallas Willard. What I would do is I'd start reading books, and they would quote another book, and then I'd go get that book, and then it just kind of became this. I think I read. I mean, I could go on. It was just so many books about formation, foundation, and then we were doing marriage books as well by gosh, what was it? I can't remember the name, but we did several marriage workbook kind of things. Stephanie, and God really wanted us to be there together working this out. In fact, we went to Chicago a couple of weeks ago for a wedding of one of the kids of the couples that we did home church with. There were 4, 5, 6 other couples over the years. And we just started off with, hey, we're a mess, we got all this going on. And the other couple was adopting 2 kids. They were struggling with that. Everybody was kind of dealing with something. And we just got real transparent and very authentic from the get-go. And to this day, it's probably one of the best church experiences I ever had. Just that real small, close-knit. And those couples are all in families. We stay very connected to this day. But that's what I was missing in Peru, was connection. And that's what I say when I give this from a business perspective, a toolbox or faith-driven entrepreneur, is there's no lone wolves. God didn't make us to do this on our own. And so if you think you weren't made to be vulnerable, I would say you're wrong. First of all,
I'd be curious. Yeah, that's really, that's powerful. I'd be curious if you have a chance to think about, I don't know if it's Gary Thomas or one of the other writers that have written a lot on marriage, but if you have a chance to look back through what some of those authors, we'd be glad to share those in the links. I'm always curious what's impactful, what truly spoke to individuals.
And Mickey, so what does the process look like now? If we just fast forward, and then we can come back to the business stuff, because I know there's other things happening now, but that gives us a pretty good picture of, kind of a moonshot on the career, and how underneath, obviously the personal life was struggling, and then you're starting recovery with community. So I know you're in ministry to families that have had this same issue. What does that look like today?
So, we go to Memorial Drive Presbyterian Church. Brett Hurst is a dear friend. He was here Sunday night. And so anytime a couple shows up in his office, he, if it makes sense, sends them to me or Steph or both. through our church basically. And then 12-step recovery. I'm very active in that here in Houston and sponsor people. And that's a way to share my faith, right? And of course, I used the 12 steps, but Jesus was, and the Father, Son, Holy Spirit, very big part of that. But probably the most was when we were in Brazil towards the end of our time there, we connected with Halftime, went to Dallas, met Bob Buford when he was still alive, and they connected us to a Fair Recovery, and that's a group out of Austin. And Rick Reynolds is the founder, and basically they have a ministry. They have a weekend a month where they bring in 40 or 50 couples from all over the world in the T-Bar M there in New Braunfels.
Yep.
And they have this material that Rick's developed over the years with his team about how do you kind of kickstart recovery, forgiveness, grieving, empathy development, different work material that you go through. And then Steph and I'll go and share our story and work with them, the couples while we're there, help connect them to resources, or really help them get on a path of recovery and healing. We also lead phone, as I mentioned, phone groups. And it's really about paying it forward. I think when God does something like this in your life, in my view, you don't really have an option other than to be a wounded healer. To tell the story of how, hey, God got me through this.
Yeah.
And it's a miracle, no question. I should not be married to my wife at this moment, but I am. And that was divine. That wasn't Mickey. That was Father, Son, Holy Spirit that brought people into our lives and resources and community. And so I need to tell that story. And that's when Jeff was like, hey, call me. I'll show up. I've met Tom. It's like, just tell the story of disconnection and isolation, the addiction and affair. And then I had a quadruple bypass heart surgery a year and a half ago. And that was a big cause of that was the isolation, the stress, but stress dealt with in isolation, on my own, without community, asking for help, being vulnerable. I have this picture here that's always, this is a painting of by Carl Bloch, and it's Jesus being strengthened by an angel in the Garden of Gethsemane.
Wow.
And so a really beautiful painting, but it just shows Jesus needed a hug. I probably need one too.
Well, and all his buddies were asleep.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, he's sweating drops of blood, but
exactly. He's like, dude, yeah, I need an angel over here.
Yeah, the God sent an angel to comfort him because he knew he's stressed out, man. This is a big weight. And it worked. I always say when I get to heaven, I want to ask Jesus, hey, was that legit? Or was that just, for show? Did you really need a hug? I'm guessing he'll say, I needed a hug, man. That was a rough day coming up. So
Mickey, how would you capsule? Unfortunately, we don't have your wife with us, but I mean that's a tough ask for a spouse. How would you capsulate her side of the story best way you can?
Sure. Then we'd love to do it with Steph too. We do that all the time. But anyway, Steph's from Jersey, so she's a Jersey girl, which means she's tough.
She's tough.
She's tough. She doesn't suffer fools, and she calls her husband out. Thank God, whenever he needs it. But anyway, she's the one that really jumped in and said, "We're not going to let this destroy our marriage." From the beginning. And so she really, found different resources and got us back, and we connected with the therapist. And so she was from the get-go really not wanting to let this destroy our marriage. We had 2 kids. Actually, when she was pregnant with the third, she got pregnant right away after the affair, which is a whole nother story. But anyway, and so when we went to Brazil, she started sharing about what she was going through, and appropriate moments with other women, and she realized that some of them were going through the same thing, but how much it helped her to share it and to talk about it. And so I was kind of like, "Are you kidding me? I thought we were going to keep this thing on the down low.
Right.
Really, I don't want to. I'm the bad guy here, right? Come on."
Right.
But then we started doing more of that together. And that's how we connected with Halftime. Is how do we? What Steph would tell you is when she was the day after trying to figure out what next, there was really, can you get through something like this, right? And there really wasn't much out there where people really talked about the trenches, right? How do you do this? how do you get through something like this with God? What does that look like? You know, you can say, well, I had God and everything was fine and we got through it. Okay, well, what did you do? What does that mean? Tell me more. And so she was very determined that if we did get through it, we would be that couple. That we would be the couple that said, here's what happened. Here are the, good, bad, and ugly. It's not a straight path, it's a crooked path. And but this is what it looked like for us. And so she was the one that really was the instigator of sharing the story.
Mm.
And then I saw it, and she would say that when it first happened, the first year or two after, it was a wound, which meant it was very sensitive, very hard to talk about, very emotional. And 20 plus years later, now it's a scar. It's still there, but it's what Jesus still had his scars when he came back in his resurrected body. And so she calls them beautiful scars, right? These are scars that tell a story, that is really a story of God and his work, his miracle in our lives. And so she's whenever we tell our story, nobody's looking at me, everybody's looking at her like, how is she, does she know this? Or it's like they're amazed
Right.
because we kind of have, it is what it is, but a really bad story. And my Stephanie was the go-between because my affair partner had the child, Isaac. And so we had to interact with her over the years
Yep.
a lot. And Stephanie was the go-between.
Oof.
Yeah. And then she sued us for more money a couple of years ago. It was just my wife is she's there are no words. She really is just she always said, like, she would say things like, I don't know how God's going to get us through it, but I'm open. That's where I am right now. I'm just open and I'm willing. I have no idea how this is gonna, she wasn't initially on board with the Brazil thing. Like, you're a sex addict, we're moving to Brazil. Are you kidding me? Hey, come on. And there's a whole nother story there too. But she was like, okay, she saw it was God's will and she surrendered, in spite of her Jersey girl, thing. And she, okay, I'm in.
And it sounds like she's got a pretty strong faith.
She does. She's her Jacob. She wrestles with God. She's like not one who just, okay, she'll wrestle and she's got some bruises
Yeah.
through that experience. And so she wrestles with it, but when she says she's in, she's in. You don't have to wonder or question. Because she works to get to the place of acceptance. But when she's there, she's there. And so she's got a very, I would call it a very practical, tested faith. Yeah.
So I'm thinking of two different people that are, somebody's running on the treadmill, listen to this, or riding in their car, listen to this. And one of them is maybe working a lot of hours and is kind of isolated and vulnerable to that kind of situation. And maybe the other one is frankly in the situation. And we'll get to a practical tip that's maybe a little smaller at the end, but what would you say to those guys?
Well, it's about getting out of your comfort zone, right? I mean, you have this when it was in the worst of the worst and acting out and lying and having somebody you can be on anybody you can be honest with and really just get real and go, hey, I'm in the middle of something. And I didn't see that model growing up. I never saw anybody just get real about something like that. So I just thought that's the last thing you want to do. But you will get through it. You will be okay. And if you have somebody to really go against the grain, if you will, of your feelings and what you're, because you want to keep it a secret. If the guy who's in it, think you can control it and manage it. And I'm here to tell you, you can't. As much as you think you have all the tools and levers and resources to keep it quiet, it will come out. And the sooner you out yourself, the better. That's always the thing, is the sooner you out yourself, the better. It's the longer you wait, it only gets worse. I guess in our culture today, Joe Paterno is probably the best example of
Oh
that,
yeah.
right? He was able to cover up that Penn State thing for decades, and when it came out, he lived 6 months and died.
Devastating.
Devastating. He never was able to recover from that. So as bad as you think it is, it's only going to get worse. So the sooner you out yourself, the better.
And then what about the guy who's vulnerable but maybe hadn't gotten it? How do you prevent it?
Well, it's about connection. You do in C13 and C12. I'm sorry, C12 and Vistage is what I do now. But groups of men find where you're able to get to a place of safety where you can share with other men. I think there's this fallacy that some men are vulnerable, some men aren't. Some men can ask for help, other men can't. I think it's not optional. We all need help. We all need to be humble ourselves. And so I would say, find connection with other men that are safe and that are, heading in a direction that looks like a direction you want to head. and get connected, because that's the real sort of takeaway is that God built us for that. The way that God speaks to me today most powerfully is through other men. When I reach out for help and I'm desperate, or I'm really needing prayer, or I'm needing to talk about something, someone picks up the phone and is there for me, that's wow, okay, thank you. That's God in a very powerful and so that's the what I didn't have, which led to the addiction and led to the heart disease. And so now I'm in a lot of groups.
Yeah. You're definitely paying it forward. And as Jeff always does a good job of making sure we have things in the show notes. Vistage, C12. I know you're involved with Vistage and Convene, and even halftime groups that go. And I'm even think of one of the guys, a friend of ours in common, is Trevor Harris, that works here at Arcos, and I know he's a promoter of Find, which I think it's mostly just in Houston right now. But those kind of accountability groups of 6 or 8 men who meet every week, and kind of it's confidential, but it's real discipleship as a group where they can be transparent with one another. I know I've got all kinds of people that I know their lives have been transformed by just having that group that they can share things
Yeah.
with and work through. So we'll try to put links to all those. And then we'll try to also put a link to the kind of ministry that you're doing on the weekends. What was the name of the organization again?
It's just a fair recovery is
Fair
the name
Recovery.
of
Yeah,
that. And then that's anybody who's in that, the guy who's in it, I would always recommend that. It's a great, Rick is probably the most Christ-like man I've known ever. He's very Christ-like, very devout Christian, but he's also a trained therapist. And so it combines let's call it the science or the psychology with the spiritual.
yeah,
And so it's really, I think, the best mix, because you don't want to over spiritualize. Let's just pray about it and you'll be on your way and everything will be fine, or obviously the science without the spiritual doesn't work either, but a good combination. And Rick and his team are all trained therapists. They've all been through it.
yeah.
They've all been through it themselves. So they're all wounded healers, and they're all Christians. So it's really, I can't imagine a better,
Combination.
better
You need both.
combination.
Well, you
Yeah,
need all three,
exactly.
I guess, maybe so the experience, but then the clinical part and also the spiritual part.
Yeah.
And well, I think this is just such a great illustration. I like the way you've thought of it. What did you say? Your mess becomes your message.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what, if you want the takeaway or whatever you said,
Yeah.
is when you're in that moment, and whether it's a test or a trial, or you're actually blowing it, you're in the middle of a mess that's of your making. Those are the most teachable moments. But it's what questions should I be asking God? It's okay, God, what are you trying to teach me here? What do you want me to learn here? What's the next right thing for me to do? How do I take that next step? And so, because God, I call it, remember that commercial in the Marines where there would be this city and it was gunshots and screams, and everybody was running away from the city, and the Marines are going into it. That's God, right?
Mm.
In the middle of your worst mess that you think you want to hide and cover up, God's in the middle of that doing his best work. It doesn't intimidate him, it doesn't scare him, it doesn't overwhelm him. He's like, let's go, let's
Mm.
get to work. And that's when he does his, in my experience, the miracles and the stories. If we had an hour, I could tell you some of them, but it's just one after another of how he shows up and just, always exceeds expectations. The upside is the other thing too, is you think your life, I always thought my life was over, right? I thought that's it.
Right.
I'm just going to kind of eke out a whole humdrum Christian existence and try not to screw anything else up, right?
Right.
That's as good as I can get for Mickey, but God had other plans, and he's
Mhm.
always surprised me with the upside. Kind of
Mm.
like Peter in John 21, right? You're still my guy, right? Get out there feeding my sheep.
Mm.
Is you're qualified for real ministry. Now you're
Mm.
really, I can really use you because you're broken. You know
Mm.
your limitations. You're humbled.
I
Mhm.
think that's
no
such a
longer.
great point, Mickey, that it's a lie from the enemy that you now have to shrink.
Yeah,
Wouldn't it be great
exactly.
if he just put you on the shelf forever now,
Yeah.
instead of really, okay, now I can use you. It really have a huge positive impact rather than shrinking, get bigger but for a better cause.
Yeah.
Really
No,
beautiful.
exactly. That's God's way. I mean, that's what he does when we you know make a mess. He says, "Okay, let's go. Let me put you back up, and you need a time of recovery and healing. But now go tell the story.
Yeah.
Go. That's I think in our culture today, the best way to share the gospel is that wounded healer model. You're
Wounded
Yeah.
talking
healer.
to people who are desperate, who need help, and you can say, "Hey, I know a way.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I've been there."
Well,
Yeah.
Mickey, you certainly have been generous with your words. I was just reading recently, been doing some studying about how to promote generosity in that next generation. And they talk about the 7 types of generosity: thoughts, words, time, money, influence, attention, and belongings. You're definitely using your experience through
Mhm.
your words to provide generously and pour into the lives of
In
men,
time.
both
Yeah.
both in getting in as proactively and healing. So
Mhm.
thank you for what you're doing. Any final thoughts related to Vistage?
Well,
I know.
just it's yeah, Vistage is a corporate is for businessmen and women who are CEOs and business owners. It's the groups that I lead, and it's the connection and the support, and of course in Houston, there are a lot of Christians in there too. It's not explicitly a Christian organization, but there's plenty of Christians involved in it, and so and share their faith in there as well. So it's a way for business owners and CEOs to have peers that they can talk to and get input and suggestions and feedback, and really get called out if they need to, if they're, above their, or was it ahead of their skis, or,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Over
you
their
know,
skis.
over
over
their
their
tips.
But
skis.
Yeah.
that's a good combo for you, right? As a guy
Yeah.
who's all about community, and
Yeah.
obviously you got a lot of business skill and maybe meeting them at that place, but also can bring other things to the table where it's a bit of a 360 view, right?
Yeah, no, that's the goal. Exactly. Thank you, Jeff. You did a great pitch there for me. I
There you
appreciate
go.
it.
There you go. Well,
Oh,
okay.
check's in the mail.
We have a feeling what your tip might be, but because we probably foreshadowed it, but just a practical tip. Sometimes these stories are big and overwhelming, and we always want somebody to kind of wrap it up with just something somebody can do that's listening to this, maybe that they're not doing. Some guy behind you on this journey. What would your just practical tip be?
Well, so when I get overwhelmed, my mantra that I use is, and I feel like I get future tripping and trying to worry, and is what's the God show me the next right thing,
Hmm.
Mm.
just the next right thing. Let's pick up the phone and make a call. Maybe it's go for a walk. Maybe it's but just really, I find that to be very, very kind of grounds me and like, okay, I just want to do that next right thing, right? And many times that next right thing can lead to a next right thing. And if you're on a bad path, you can start to get on a better path, but just literally one next right thing at a time, and start stacking those together, and then you're on a better path. But just distilling it down to that the prayer and
the micro, just
the next
one
right
step
thing
in the right direction.
Yeah, what is it, God? What is that next right thing? Yeah,
I like it. Ask God for the next step and just put your foot where He says. So
yeah, exactly. Don't ask any questions. Just do the next right
exactly.
thing. Exactly. But how? Wait, I want to know how's this? No. Next right thing.
Well, this has been great. So thank you so much for Jeff and I for the folks running on the treadmill. We always try to ask everybody to maybe tell at least one setback story, and it takes vulnerability to do that. And you've done that in spades, and so that vulnerability really leads to ministry. So we just thank you for doing that with us and for what you do for the whole community. So thank you so much, Mickey, for being with us.
Thank you, Mickey.
And thanks, everybody, for being with us on this week's Generous Business Owner Podcast. Share it with a friend. Like it. Check out our website, and we will see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Generous Business Owner Podcast with Jeff Thomas, Alan Barnhart, and Jeff Rutt. Make sure to follow the podcast so you don't miss an episode. You can find the guest contact information in the show notes. Stay tuned for the next episode.